Welcome to the Resilient Businessmen podcast, episode number 9, I think it is now. This morning, in the cold, dark, cloudy northeast, I'm joined by Danny Inman, who's going to share his resilient journey. We've just briefly spoke about it before pressing record, from originally doing Chinese takeaways to the point now he's really successful in his property journey. So this is going to be a very intriguing one, and I'm going to learn something myself. So Danny, do you want to just give a quick introduction and then we'll start your journey?
Oh, thanks, Chris. Looking forward to speaking to you today. Obviously, it's a bit sunnier here than the northeast, and my backdrop is by the sounds of it. So, Danny Inman Property. That's my name on socials everywhere, and that's pretty much what we do. Anything property related is what we've done for the last 15, 16 years now. It's been a hell of a ride, and has needed resilience throughout, which is probably the relevant point for you in this podcast. But I don't know how far back you want to go. I've had various stages of needing resilience and lacking resilience and gaining resilience through even before the 15 years, starting as a kid into adulthood and various things there.
So the common theme for most of the guys who come on, there's a big influence through childhood, which then impacts teens, 20s, etc. So let's start from childhood with you, Danny. What went on back in the day?
I loved my childhood, actually. I really enjoyed school. I was a sporting person. I played rugby league to a very high level. And childhood, albeit there was some family stuff going on, parent separation, and we weren't wealthy at all. But everything else kind of came a bit easy to me as a kid. So I was very, very talented at sports and was probably one of the best in my age group nationally. Kind of breezed through rugby as a kid. And the same academically, I found school quite easy. I didn't have to necessarily work that hard to get decent grades. Was very popular in school, a bit of a jock like you see on the American TV shows. Kind of everything came quite easily and naturally to me at school and throughout those years, which was great at the time, but in hindsight probably worked against me in the long term, because I didn't have to build up any particular resilience because I was breezing through it quite easily. Probably had a misunderstanding that, I thought academia coming really easy was going to be a blessing, and actually it came out in the end, it ended up being a bit of a curse, because when I did hit a bit of a challenge, I was actually at university when I hit first challenges. I hadn't built up that resilience as a kid really to be able to go, you've just got to get through this and work your way through this and whatever it may be. And I quit university when I probably would have aced it. I'm almost certain now, in hindsight, looking back, I would have absolutely smashed it. And I think when I did quit it was a bit of a surprise to everybody. And it was literally because I'd hit my first challenge and I hadn't built up enough resilience and strength to be able to tackle it. So I hear a lot and read a lot now about parents who are giving their kids everything and making their life easier. And a lot of their motivation is, I want my kid's life to be easier than I had it, and all of that. And whilst emotionally that makes sense, I think in some cases a bit of struggle is absolutely vital and so valuable to people. And I never really had that. We didn't know struggle as kids, as a family level. I look back now and go, bloody hell, we were quite poor, but you don't really feel it at the time. And then academically and rugby wise, it was all very easy, and I was sponsored. I got sponsors for everything. I was sponsored to go to college. I was sponsored to go to uni. I was under a talented athlete scholarship scheme. I had just cash being thrown at me as a young kid. I signed a professional rugby league contract on very good money for a 15, 16-year-old. So even at that point, money wasn't a challenge, and I didn't really need that level of resilience. It was interesting that when I got my first challenge, that was one I crumbled under really, and didn't deal with it particularly well at all.
So just two things there. How did you react to your parents splitting up? Because that can have a major impact on mindset and mental health for kids. Yeah,
do you know what? For me, that was, it should have happened before. In honesty, and it was 15, 16-ish then, I think, at the time. And you sit back going, well, neither of you were particularly happy, and
Yeah.
actually fair play for you to doing it. I think the one for me was, at that point, I stayed with one parent and probably should have gone with the other. And I did that out of guilt because I had two sisters who had moved out and one had gone with the other parent. And actually, in hindsight, that wasn't the best thing for me. I spent a lot of time on my own. And yeah, again, being on my own, I didn't really have to, I guess people would view that as some level of resilience, but it didn't, I didn't develop, I don't think, kind of a mental strength, or you kind of feel a bit victimized and you allow yourself to be a victim in those circumstances, and I stayed here for you and you're never here, and all of those things. But I don't think that separation in itself had a massive emotional impact on me, because I thought it was the right thing for both of them to do it. I guess it did put me in a position that I probably wouldn't have chosen, regardless of the separation. But yeah, I don't really harbour any ill feelings over the fact that that happened.
Oh, got you. I can relate to that. My parents split up, and I think it might have not affected you because 15, 16, you were a bit grown up and level-headed, maybe. I was like really young, so it did mess with my head up a little bit. And then what happened with this thriving rugby career that you were building? What happened?
You know, I've always been quite financially motivated, and I think mainly because we had nothing as kids. I always looked to somebody else, and when they had money, that was like a motivation for me. And what does that person do? And it was always really interesting. So rugby league, for anyone that knows, whilst you were well known in your town and you were renowned and you had a little bit of Z-list fame for being good at the sport, it paid so badly at the time. Like, there's no money in the game, and the game, unfortunately, is on its last legs still now. And even now, there's more money and it's still on its last legs. But you were getting beat up by big blokes every single week, getting injuries and your nose smashed in and whatnot, and not a lot of money. And I trained with the first team as a kid, and I was watching some of the older boys, basically my age now, 35, 36, and they were retiring, and then they were going to like train to be a plumber or a decorator. And whilst there's nothing against those careers, you've smashed your body for 20 years, and now you're going back into what is a fairly regular like job. And a lot of them would struggle with the mental health when they retired and they lost all of the attention that they were getting in the town, and now they were just somebody who's gone to a regular job and had a decent career, but it's all very soon forgotten about. So I looked at that at even 16, 17 and thought, no, I don't love the sport enough to get battered for 20 years and then have to start again.
So you really were switched on, just to like know, because people would have just continued for at least, I don't know, 5, 6 more years, you know? I would have thought.
Yeah, a lot of people do, and a lot of people are like, even now I get messages off lads that I played with at 16, 17, and they're retiring, and they're like, can you help us? You know, we're coming to the end of our career. They haven't really planned for the end of the career, and fucking hell, glad I took the route that I did, even though at the time, like, it really pissed my dad off that I was a very good rugby player who'd built up, and you know, he'd followed me all around the country and playing rugby to a very high level, and now I've just gone, nah. It's not for me. So financially then driven, I decided I wanted to go to university, and the only people I really knew at that age that were making money were like doctors, dentists, lawyers, and engineers. And I was always pretty reasonable at maths, understood on engineering broadly, and had a good understanding for it. And it was the one thing out of all those things I thought, yeah, I fancy that. So I went and did a civil engineering and advanced maths degree at the University of Manchester, basically. And yeah, that was another great time. But again, probably the first real challenge I had there, and the only time I think in my life I've ever really quit anything, was at university. So did breeze the first year, breeze the second year, did okay in the third year, had a bachelor's, master's degree, and quit. Set of exams that I just couldn't get my head around. Right. I was done. I was out. So and yeah.
The masters where you quit, you got your normal bachelor's and then you quit the master.
Yeah. So and it bothered me like so mentally. I got very, very ill off the back of that, because at that point my mum had really supported me going to university. I think now I'm 21, 20, I can't remember, 21, 22 at the time. And I've done two things very, very well and had some success. Hated both, or not really enjoyed both as much as I thought I would. Disappointed dad and mum separately for separate reasons, and kind of like, well, what do I do now? And it just genuinely, at that point in my life, it felt like the end of the world. Like it genuinely felt like, oh, you know. And you become very irrational. I'm sure you may have had some experiences, mental health yourself, or spoke to people.
Yeah.
The irrationality that is the toughest. And at that point in my life, I was so irrational. It was untrue. Like I became desperate. If anything, I was applying for anything. I did a mortgage qualification in 8 weeks because I thought that would be a good idea. I started to register for accountancy courses. I thought, oh, sod this, I'll be great in the forces. I'll go in the forces. And they said, oh, you can't come in for, I think it was 2 years at the time, until you're off prescription for antidepressants that I never actually took in the first place, but because I got prescribed them, they wouldn't let me in. So become really desperate and irrational at that point in my life. Ended up delivering Chinese takeaways. That's the lead time, and that was just to bring some cash in. I wasn't well at all, and very much at that point had to develop some kind of resilience from there to kind of drive me forward.
So what's your outlook on university on reflection now? I've got my own views since my degree, but it hasn't really helped me in my life. I don't know about it.
Well, no, I'm the same. You know, I'm a massive believer in education, but formal education teaches you to make a living, whereas life education teaches you how to live your life. And I one of the breaking points for me in my degree was actually, I had a graduate scholarship. As I mentioned, I've been sponsored throughout my life. I got a graduate scholarship with Laing O'Rourke as an exceptional academic who had like a decent background, and they basically was going to walk into a job straight away off the back of uni. And one of the internships in the summer, I was really proud that I could work out the force through a beam down to its natural its original derivatives algebraically. Yeah, spit it out. And I went and spoke to the guy who was head of work there, and he basically said, "Oh, we don't need to know that. We have a computer that does that." And I was like, "For fuck's sake, what am I learning it for then? Like, well, I'm going to be a glorified data entry clerk after I graduate here." So it was an interesting one. It was definitely an interesting one in that scenario. That I think education's great, and I think the right education can change your life. But too much education is a memory test now, and too much of it isn't relevant. Like I literally know a load of people who've done degrees and they remember certain things, and then 6 months later they couldn't remember the detail of the test anyway, and it's like,
yeah, that's pointless.
It's just pointless, absolutely pointless in the long term of your life. So it's great. Socially I wouldn't change it for the world. Life experience, building friendships, living on your own, sharing bills, taking responsibilities, cooking for yourself, all these various things that at university it'll be the first time for children they've done it, is incredible. But educationally it's so off the mark at the minute, it's untrue. If you want to, the government plan is to teach people to get a job, pay taxes and die, isn't it? And that's how the whole UK is built, as a business model from a governmental level. So
and you don't really realize that until you enter like the investing world there, because then you start thinking, holy fuck, there's something else going on over here now.
Economics is probably, I'm obsessed with economics. Anyone that follows me on socials will see it's one of my biggest things really that I absolutely adore. But how little I knew of that until I got investment was embarrassing and probably shameful, really, for not just for me, but anyone that taught me anything, because it's the most important thing. Like cash flow management, bill management, household management. We're working on debt, taking debt, how to utilize debt. All of these things are value that have made me significantly more money and valuable as a person than the derivatives of force through a beam would ever need to. So yeah, it's a very interesting space. But at that point, that was the lowest point of my life, definitely, was when I quit that, because I just felt like I'd let a lot of people down. And I also felt like, am I ever going to find anything that I'm good at, passionate about? Sorry, not good at, but passionate about and love. Yeah, and that was the challenge for me then.
Cool. So at this point, you're delivering Chinese takeaways. Where do we go from there?
I was sent on a property education course that in hindsight was probably 99% bullshit. But at the time, I was sent literally as a +1 with somebody else. And it just made sense. You know, it was very logical, and I'm a logical person. It was about numbers, it was about property, it was about people. I could piece together, okay, I can kind of see where I fit it. At this point, I'm absolutely skint, living in a spare room in my mum's house, not particularly happy there, delivering Chinese takeaways, thinking, I'm going to get into property. And you think, what? Like, you look back and you think, bloody hell, you were deluded at the time. But thankfully, I was deluded enough, I think. So went to that course and never looked back. And I think actually it gave me something to focus on when I was mentally struggling. And it gave me a bit of hope. And that's all I really needed at that time in my life, was a bit of hope and something to go, put your attention here. And I just gradually recovered in my health over a period of time by transitioning all the energy that was going into feeling like a victim and into dealing with depression, moving that over to a new focus and something in property, getting some little wins and recognizing, oh, I can see progress here, even if it's getting, even back then you're looking, oh, I get a response to an inquiry, or an agent's called me back, or whatever it may be. The tiny things now just felt huge at that time, absolutely huge.
When you're struggling with your mental health, that's what you need, isn't it? A little bit of hope, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and 100%. Then you start to pick up the momentum, and so that's what happened with you there.
Yeah. So 15 years later, we do between 25 and 50 million in property a year, between 250 to 300 units. We're just about to open our first apart hotel. We have property abroad. Mad time, mate. Absolutely mad. We bought and sold businesses. I had a letting agency that I sold for more money than I'd ever thought I'd get in one hit in my life. Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been absolutely crazy.
But how did you step onto the property ladder before we get to that?
I didn't buy for 18 to 24 months. So I know it's very much flavor of the month at the minute, and people might scoff, but we sourced. We were doing property sourcing for the first 18 months. Didn't buy a property, found 2 or 3 buyers. You know, we look at that market. We were 2008, 9, 10 when we first got into it. 2008, 9, 10, yeah.
So the recession.
Just come out of the crash, for want of a better word. I have big feelings about that. But we just come out of we were in what was then the bottom of the market. Everybody was scared to buy. Investors were cleaning up. So it was, honestly, it was like shooting fish in a barrel then. It was, in hindsight, another blessing that I entered the market at that point as a deal sourcer. It was very, very easy to find stock then. It was, incredibly easy. We found 2 or 3 good buyers. A couple of them bought 30, 40 properties each. We built up enough capital to then start buying ourselves kind of 18, 24 months after. We built a letting agency. The letting agency was managing all the stock we were sourcing. So that's where the letting side come from. Then it just took over from there. Yeah, we started buying ourselves in late 2009, early 2010. Was when we first started buying ourselves. And then, found a big JV partner around 2012, 2013, very cash rich, international. They put all the money in all the deals. We found all the deals. We split everything 50-50. We ended up with over 300 HMO rooms at our peak with them and other people. So yeah, it just went kind of steady. I mean, it took time. The problem in property, everyone wants it in 10 minutes. So
yeah, overnight.
I'm 13, 14, 15 years in. So in that kind of time period, we've done a lot, and it feels like a lot. Everyone says it's a lot in hindsight, but literally just been incredibly consistent for 13 years. and compounding's looked after everything else really.
Yeah.
Certainly looked after our scaling. So yeah.
What would your advice be to somebody who's literally just starting out, such as myself, in property? I've literally just dipped my toe in it.
Good. Accept that it's slow and it takes time. Ignore a lot of the news and the noise. There's an incredible amount of hype around property, both in the property world itself, with people selling your dreams, and in the media, because property is such a political focus that they talk about things like boom and crash and unaffordability, and there's so much drama around it. It's a very, very logical space, property, incredibly logical. It's people that make it seem like it's boom and crash when it really isn't. It's quite steady and consistent. You know, you look at the last crash, for example, everybody talks about it, but from peak to trough, it was 18%. It took 18 months for that to happen. You know, it does take time. It's slow. It's not like crypto. If the market does take a turn, it's slow to happen. And then the same, it's slow to grow. Like the last 2 years, 2.5 years now, we've seen 20% growth, but we see that in crypto or stocks and shares overnight or over a few months. So it's just a bit slow, and I like that. Some people don't like that. Some people think property is too slow for them. I like that consistency. Just keep chipping away. Make relevant changes in the market. You have to change your approach when the market changes. You can't always buy in a one-dimensional way in every market. And that's it. Stay in it for the long term, really. So it's a very long play. It's hard work, but it's definitely worth it.
Nice. What's your predictions for what we're about to going? I'll not say recession if you're against recession, but what's your thought?
No, I don't mind. Listen, recessions are a natural part of the economic cycle, and I think people spend so much time emotionally getting worked up about recessions when they have to happen, and they follow a period of unsustainable growth in every single economic cycle we've ever been through. So recession brings a lot of opportunity for those that are willing to work for it. There's no doubt about it. There's never, Warren Buffett says the best time to get rich is during a recession. He says a lot of things. When there's blood on the streets, that's when you take your opportunities. And it's only when the tide goes out do we see who's been swimming naked, and all these various sayings that he says, all relevant to recessions. But for me, it's not something that can be avoided. And I think a lot of the time the governments make a lot of noise about helping people and all of that, but some of that causes so much damage, and it comes back full circle to what we were saying earlier. You can help people too much. We don't have a cost of living crisis now. We have a cost of lockdown crisis. So all of this inflationary measure and all the fact that we now need a recession is because of the amount of help people were given, rightly or wrongly, for the amount of time they've been giving it. So yeah, I don't worry about recessions. I think they are a natural part of the cycle. Also, a recession doesn't necessarily mean that the housing market's going to tank. The housing market, whilst there are links, it isn't exclusively linked to recessions. So we'll see. I'm quite bullish on the housing market. I've said since day one, since COVID hit, actually, I've been one of the very few who said that the house prices will continue to grow despite lockdowns. And at times, I had some very heated debates with people that you may have seen on my social medias. But I just need supply, demand, availability, of finance. They're the three pillars in the housing market. And supply was ridiculously low. Demand was incredibly high, and the banks were more liquid than they've ever been in history. So my perspective was that it was going to go up by, at the time I said 15 to 20% to then correct 10%. I actually think it'll probably end up now going up 25 to 30% to correct 5 to 10% potentially. So it's all everything's relativity, isn't it? Because the media will jump on the fact that it's dropped 10% by the point it's dropped 10%. They won't jump onto the fact that actually let's extrapolate that over a 5-year period, because we all said it was going to crash in 2020. That's what the media said. It was saying it's going to drop 15 to 20%, and they got it wrong by 40% because it increased 20%. So they were miles out. So what they'll do is they'll focus on the 10%. Rather than the relativity of it. It's such a great model long term. if you're trying to get in and out quickly, then you are reliant on timing in the market. If you want to be a long-term person in property, then time in the market is more important than timing. And I think that's what a lot of people forget.
Yeah, the media just scaremongers and just puts negativity on everything. And I don't watch the news anymore, so I don't really know what's going on.
I watch the news because I'm always interested. It's very relevant for us. But I know anybody who doesn't know how to react and treat the news shouldn't watch the news. I'm logical, level-headed, and understand agendas, so I can watch the news and go, I think that element of it is relevant. X, Y, and Z is just a spin, and it's to sell a story or to create something that matches an agenda. So yeah, I'm fairly chilled around the news.
So what's the future for your business, and what's your strong reason why are you doing all of this?
I mean, that is the one question I struggle with more than anything, if I'm honest. So everyone says you need to have a why and a motivation, a big desire. We don't have kids, so we've not really got that legacy plan yet that I think a lot of people do. For me, I'm very fulfillment of potential. Like, I'm obsessed with not dying wondering if I could have done a bit more. And I know I'm going to die knowing I could have done a bit more, because that's just the nature of reality. Is, in fact, we all could have done a bit more. But that not fulfilling my potential is very, very scary to me. Like, you know, that's a blessing and a curse. And I talk about this with my business partner a lot. We're both very, very driven, but never that satisfied. Like, we're happy with what we've done, but we know we can do more. And I think that's probably a symptom of most addictive, personality-driven entrepreneurs, for want of a better word. So, yeah, my big why is probably to be self-improving until the day I die. To try and die and be the best version of myself that I could have been. I think that's a big thing for me. Next in business, we've got a couple of more apart hotels we're launching. We'll run them out quite aggressively if the first couple go to plan. Yeah, we've got a lot. We're trying to buy a number of portfolios at the minute to increase our base level stock. I posted about that this morning. Just keep adding to the pot. We have a property education company. And the reason I started that was because I wanted to do everything differently to what was in the market. So we've got goals with that, really. I love that. I love seeing other people having the successes you've had over the same period, because 13, 14 years in now, it gets a bit boring and tedious, and you don't really celebrate the wins like you used to. I was talking to somebody the other day, actually, and they said, oh, how would you feel if you lost everything? And I think they were expecting me to go, oh, I'd be so gutted. In my head, I went straight away, oh, I love that.
Exciting.
Yeah, and it's not that I want to physically lose every bit of money. I miss that feeling of starting something new and being excited and scared, and you know, all the learnings that you get really early on in business. In hindsight, I mean, it didn't feel like it at the time, but in hindsight, without a doubt, that is the best part of business.
Mad, isn't it? Like, trenches, you don't understand. You're so focused on the end goal, but as you said, they're the best times, the ups and downs.
100%. Like, you see the most growth in yourself at those points. You see the most growth in your business, like your business plan changing and evolving, and relationships being formed. Without sounding knobby, as you get like a number of years in and you've done a lot and a decent volume, it almost becomes a bit too easy. You don't have to work that hard to form relationships anymore. You market something, it sells. You know, you've got finance being raised really easy. People want to lend to you, sell to you. You know, everybody's goal is for it to be easier. Actually, like, well, your level of your growth, your personal growth starts to slow the easier it gets. So yeah, just maybe moving into new business spaces we've never operated in before, potentially. And that's a little bit of what's behind the hotel space, is that, you know, we're property developers. We don't really know short-term accommodation. But if we can go into that space and learn a bit and conquer it, and we can develop the buildings for our hotel model, and there's a massive win-win there. So I think that was a driver in that, really. But yeah, I'd love to start again.
I don't know if you've ever experienced gold medal syndrome, you know, like where you
Right.
achieve such a goal and then you get there and you're like, fuck, now what? Have you ever experienced that? Yeah.
100%. Well, I have what's called, and it's what I do with a lot of the people we work with in our network or people that I coach, we have what's called dream life. So we basically get people to go, right, what is your dream life? What's the size of house? What would the mortgage payments be on that? You know, how many holidays do you want to go in a year? What would that work out to monthly? What car do you want to drive? What's that on a monthly lease? What do you want to spend on like restaurants? So we basically get it fully costed to go, how much does your dream life cost? And for most, that's a great thing because it gives them this tangible target. And then what we do is we start to break down, okay, then when are you going to start doing each of those things? So you want to get there in 10 years from where you are now. In 10 years, in 2 years, if you get to X amount, what are you going to do in what order on your list? So are you going to buy that car after 2 years? Are you going to move to a bigger house after 4 years? And we start to plan it out. And the biggest drop in motivation I've ever had was when I realized I'd hit my dream life figure and I could live what I'd previously perceived as my dream life.
Wow.
And I lost for about 6 months. It kind of become a bit like, well, I've got a life that I only ever dreamed of. Like, and I'm northern, you're northern too. So it's spending more just for the sake of spending more always felt a bit grotesque. And you know, I think you're spending more than 15 grand a month on your lifestyle. I mean, I have an amazing lifestyle. I don't spend 15 grand a month, and then, you know, we've got homes abroad, and we have all sorts going on, you know. And being a business owner, you can make your dream life quite tax effective in a lot of the ways. So I was looking at it, and when I thought, well, if I go and buy another property, I'm making more cash that I then can't spend. What's the point? And that's when I started to transition to the obsession of, if I couldn't do more, I have an obligation to do more, and fulfilling maximum potential, and, you know, stretching myself further and going out of comfort zones again. But there's nothing more comfortable than a dream life, but a comfort zone is the most dangerous thing for progression that exists. So yeah, I just reassess. But it took me some time, definitely. And I've never heard of gold medal syndrome, but I guess that's entirely relevant.
Yeah, like I first heard of it from Tyson Fury, like when he won all the belts, and then he was on the session, drugs and alcohol. And when I opened up my gym, that was my childhood dream, to own a gym. As soon as I opened it, I was like, fuck, I had depression. I was like, fuck, like, what do I do now? I was lost, which you said you were lost 6 months or so. So yeah, it's a common trait for high achievers, I think.
Well, it's good. It's reassuring to know, definitely.
Right, well, just recap this. What's your last words for anybody who's going through a tough time in business? Like, what would your words of wisdom be? Keep going, of course, but
yeah, I think maybe keep going, maybe not. It depends on the derivative and reasons for the tough time. If you genuinely are flogging your dead horse, then sometimes the worst thing you can do is consume more energy on a wasted space. So first of all, you have to establish, is the model the problem? Is there demand for the model? Are other people doing what you're doing successfully? Because if there is, then you can refocus on yourself, because in that position, it's more about what you're doing than what you're offering. And if there is demand and there is requirement and other people are having some success, then look to them, see what they're doing well. More importantly, what are they not doing? I think most people struggle because they focus energies on low returning activities. So establish what is a high returning activity inside of your position and focus all your energies there. Stop trying to improve your weaknesses, delegate your weaknesses and work on your strengths. That's the biggest mistake with that by far I see people do in business. They want to be good at everything to do with their business, and it's the worst thing that they can be. And I'm terrible on site. I often put out memes taking the piss out of myself, really, that how bad I am on site, because I don't really understand it. It's not my strength. I don't speak the language of the tradesmen, don't really get along. They're always trying to pinch a little bit of time or money, and I'm saying that's just it's just not my way. So I just don't do it. I categorically do not do it. I don't go on site. I've always partnered with people who do that better than me. My business partner is phenomenal in that space, and now has a very big construction company in that space. But if I'd have tried to master that, my growth would have been nowhere near what it is now. Nowhere near. And I'm, it's a big Gary Vaynerchuk thing, that to get rid of your weaknesses and delegate your weaknesses and focus on your strengths. I think that's really important. And try and enjoy it, because when you do have some success, as we've just said there, and I'm aware it's privileged and very much a first world problem, but you'll miss that struggle. You genuinely will. We are as entrepreneurs, business owners, very complicated, individuals, very tough to be with. I'm my partner, and anyone's partner that's with somebody like us, I think fair play to you, because half the time you're not there physically, and then the other 50% of the time you are there physically. 49% of it you're not there mentally.
Not listening.
You're not listening. You're at your mind somewhere else. You're planning the next thing. We're complicated characters, definitely. And probably another tip is to find somebody who can understand that that's you, that's your mission, that's the way you're going to be, because it's definitely inbred into us. You just can't change. I'd recommend watch the Warren Buffett documentary, Becoming Warren Buffett. No,
is it on Netflix or what?
It's on YouTube. YouTube. And I would say there is nothing that's resonated with me more. I mean, he's obviously far superior in every single way to me, but the guy cannot do the simplest of tasks, because his energy isn't in that space, his energy and his mindset elsewhere. But one of the richest men in the world, completely useless at very, very basic things. So if you have to explain entrepreneurialism and high performance in entrepreneurialism, it's that, the minutiae conversations and activities we just cannot do it. I'm horrible in that space.
I resonate with that. Yeah, definitely. It's
horrible. I just don't, and I wouldn't put any value on doing it. It's coming back to the high value tasks. Beyond changing a light bulb in my house, I will do nothing. Don't do anything. Couldn't paint a wall. And I'm in construction. I'm a property developer, and I could not do a single thing. And everyone laughs and goes, haha. And I think, well, I'm probably laughing here because you're proud of being able to do a £10 an hour task. I'm going to focus my energy on a £500 an hour task, because that's focusing on high value activities. But we're weirdos, mate. We are absolute weirdos.
Right, on that note, we will finish Danny's resilient journey. Thanks for coming on, Danny. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.
And I've took some learnings myself there. All right, guys. See you in the next one. Catch you later.